Hello and welcome to Narayana IS Academy, your one-stop destination for making UPSC dream a reality, a dream that's yours and ours as well. So as we tune into the preparation for upcoming UPSC Prelims 2025 at the end of this month, here's wishing you all the best. And here we are with every kind of guidance, support and mentoring that you should need for the exam. So work hard, work timely, be extremely calm and full of confidence. And on that note, we are now starting with the Art and Culture Class 2, where we shall talk about all the important, all the critical personalities in news. Now, why is it important for prelims? Is because not only these personalities but also their achievements, contributions to Indian society and culture. They are often asked in the prelims questions. It could be the match the following, it could be in the form of pick out the right sentences, or it could be in the form of the legacy that they have left behind, which have inspired the modern day Indian secular, socialistic, democratic ethos. And on that note, let's begin with the first important, crucial personality of the day. And yes, we are talking about Shri Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji. And as November 24th marks the Shahidi Divas, a very important observation in the memory of, to honor the legacy of Shri Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, who was assassinated by Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, the last Mughal Emperor, the last important Mughal Emperor, post which we see a complete downturn in the Mughal Empire, and that actually began with 1707 onwards. And talking more about Shri Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, let's remember that his original name was Teyagmal Ji, and he was the 9th Guru of Sikhism, an extremely revered Guru because his father Shri Guru Gobind Singh Sahib was the 6th Guru, and he renamed him Tegh Bahadur Ji to honor his unique, exceptional abilities, skills, strong swordsmanship and combating methodology. So of course he was an icon, and therefore he was revered as Hind Ki Chadar, which means the shield of India, the one who protects India from aggressors and external powers. Now, he also stood as a beam of religious freedom and justice, because anyway we know that the whole ideology behind his ideas was actually to promote calm, equality, peace, national pride, honor and self-belief. And pretty much in that line, he today stands tall as a reminder of all the values that Sikhism talks about. And unfortunately, it was back in 1665 where the last Mughal major emperor Aurangzeb had executed him publicly in Delhi, and this happened in 1675 more precisely. And why did it actually happen? Because we know that religious conversion and religious controversies were a part and parcel of Indian society for a long time, especially during the end years of the British regime. Now, we also talk about certain taxes which were imposed by Aurangzeb because he was a very, very strong and a very, very, you could say, dogmatic kind of a ruler. So there was very low religious tolerance during his times, very unlike what we see during the times of, say, Akbar or Jahangir. So he also in fact reintroduced the jizya, that was the tax that was imposed on the non-Muslim people of his kingdom. And in that light, as the Shri Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji resisted any attempts of conversion, he was actually killed, and he was therefore he became such a martyr that still he is believed and his ideas are worshipped all along. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about what were his key contributions then. So of course he founded the Anandpur Sahib. Now Anandpur Sahib was established as the city of Anandpur in Punjab's Roopnagar district, and it is basically geographically just on the boundary of the Shivalik hills, pretty much overlying the Satluj river. And the city later became a site where Guru Gobind Singh Ji founded the Khalsa Panth back in 1699. Now, all these dates are milestones, very, very important in Indian history and art and culture. And therefore, let's remember a little bit about the religious and literary works contributed uh, by the personality. And he actually has written about more than 100 poetic hymns to the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the doctrine that is revered in the religion, and it addresses various themes like divinity, God, human attachment, worship, service to people, service to mankind, because of course one of the main edifices of Sikh religion is to actually serve people. That's something we should remember. So in that note, let's also talk a little bit about his diplomatic role. Of course, he played a key role in solving or arbitrating the conflict by mediating between Raja Bishan Singh and Raja Paranpal to prevent a war, because at that time, remember, Indian unity was under scanner as many minor kingdoms were allying with the British and many of them were found fighting with each other. And that was also a point of time where the Anglo-Sikh war was just in and about the same time period was raging on the Indian subcontinent. So to prevent all that, I think the message given by the Guru meant a lot in ensuring Indian unity against external forces. And on that note, it's also equally important to know various gurus of the Sikh religion and what were their key contributions. Let's also remember the succession. That's also equally crucial, because not only can you have a direct question, but even in the mains, when you say write a question about religions that emerged in India after the later Vedic period, many of them were essentially known as the protest religion, specifically the 5th and the 6th century BC, as we also talk about Jainism, Buddhism, which all of which were trying to actually combat the evils that became associated with the later very Brahminic interpretation of Hinduism, and a lot of caste rife that was happening in India, also gender exclusion in religion. So all these protest religions essentially aimed to cover up for those evils, make a more democratic religious platform, something that was based more on spirituality and worship rather than strict dogmas and followings. And they were also religions that were more liberal. So on that note, the 10 Sikh gurus that we must know about are, say for example, we talk about Sri Guru Nanak Dev, and with him the entire legacy began. That was back in 1469, and he was not only the founder of Sikh religion, but also he began the practice of Guru Ka Langar. Now it's a practice that is still very commonly followed in modern day times also, and he was a contemporary of Mughal king, the founder in fact of the Mughal Empire, Babur, whom we associate with the first war of Panipat too. And then let's understand that he also founded the Kartarpur corridor, that is commemorated in fact on his 550th birth anniversary. The next guru that we talk about was Guru Angad, and this happened in 1504. Please understand that he initiated the Guru Mukhi script. A lot of people would say that the modern day Punjabi in fact has a lot to do with the Guru Mukhi script, because that's the writing version of the language. And also he popularized and further spread the idea of Guru Ka Langar, because as I said, one of the key doctrines of Sikhism is service to people. So feeding people, feeding the hungry becomes a dominant theme here. Then we talk about Guru Amar Das Ji, and this was 1479, and one of the key contributions in fact even on the social front were his initiatives of abolishing sati and the parda, the symbolic seclusion of women. Now when we talk about abolishing sati, very often we go ahead and talk about the father of Indian Renaissance, Raja Ram Mohan Roy. We often talk about 1829, that via the efforts of Brahmo Samaj of 1828, sati was eventually abolished, also with the help of Lord William Bentinck, and much later in 1829. But of course, let's remember that even before, institutionally sati was removed from Indian society. It was back in the 1500s that Guru Amar Das Ji had done such a revolutionary initiation by speaking about the prevailing practice of sati. So that way it's also a very crucial social contribution which we should mention while we talk about evolution of Indian society or changes in the position of women or contemporary women movements. We must also highlight this, talking about the feminism movement in India, that this happened much before people actually know sati was out of practice. Also, let's remember that he was a contemporary of Akbar. He also introduced the Anand Karaj marriage ceremony. Again, one of the important tenets of Sikhism would be simplicity, and this is pretty much in line with that. Now we talk about the next Guru Ram Das, and this was 1534. We talk about how he founded the Amritsar city in 1577. That was done on a land that came from Mughal Emperor as a grant from Mughal Emperor Akbar. He also began the construction of the Golden Temple, the Swarna Mandir of Amritsar, which happens to be a very key tourist religious site in India. It stands at the epitome of architectural beauty. So he was followed by Guru Arjan Dev, and he composed the Adi Granth back in 1604. Very important to remember, of course. Let's also learn that he was the one who completed the Golden Temple. Now, many times confusing questions come as a part of prelims exam. So, for example, you may get a question about who really built or under whose aegis was the Golden Temple constructed, and you may have overlapping options. So in that case, it's really crucial to remember who was the one who initiated and under whose aegis was the construction finally closed down. So both these things are important. Also, Guru Arjan Dev is known as Shahinuddin De Sartaj. That's an important title we should remember. You could always have a question about who was bestowed with this title, and he was executed by Jahangir actually for helping Prince Khusro. So again, second case of execution by Mughal kings we are witnessing. First, of course, we saw in the previous slide. So that's important to remember. The next is very well known Guru Har Gobind. Okay, and this happened in 1594. Remember that he was the one who made this tremendous contribution of transforming the Sikh community into a military community that we call as a Khalsa, to be able to fight and defend their motherland. That's very important. He also therefore contributed to a unity among various Sikh clans and Sikh groups. He established the Akal Takht, and he also fortified, he made a defense, a very strong defense around Amritsar city. He waged wars against Mughal emperors Jahangir and Shah Jahan. Now the next was Guru Har Rai, and he focused on peacekeeping and a lot of social welfare work. So he was a real peace missionary there. And he also maintained therefore quite cordial ties with Aurangzeb, although it was a very difficult situation because constantly there was an incursion. Not only there was a pressure on religious conversions, but also there was an incursion, military incursions by the Mughal rulers, subsequent and the early ones. So in that light, his peace initiatives are quite remembered across North India. Now talking about Guru Har Kishan, he was the youngest guru because he became guru at a very minor age of 5 years. Okay, and he was also called by Aurangzeb because it was believed that he maintained a very anti Islamic ideology belief, and which he was expressing openly. So regarding that, Aurangzeb had actually called him. And the next was Guru Tegh Bahadur, a name that I think everyone is quite familiar with. So very important from examination perspective too, because he founded the Anandpur Sahib. He was also martyred by Aurangzeb for defending religious freedom. Quite an important thing there. And then we talk about Guru Gobind Singh. He founded the Khalsa in 1699. He also introduced a concept known as a new initiation rite for the Sikhs known as Pahul. Okay, he passed the entire system, the entire trend of Guru worship, or entire the Guru ascendancy to Guru Granth Sahib, becoming the last human Sikh Guru. So all these legacies are important there, and not only should we know the chronology, but also make sure that all the important contributions, specifically construction of the Golden Temple, initiation of the Khalsa Panth, we talk about the Pahul, we talk about martyred by Aurangzeb, some gurus were actually martyred for fighting for religious justice. We must talk about the youngest guru, we should know the Akal Takht. So all these basic facts are pretty important there. Okay, now having said that, we could move on to the next personality, and we are talking about Rajagopalachari, who was also referred to as Rajaji. Okay, so his contributions are so tremendous that many questions can be formulated on them. So not only because of his association with India's freedom struggle, but also in the post-independent India, the contributions he had made. Say for example, in finding a new party altogether. So which party was that, and all those things become important. So let's remember that recently he was honored on his birth anniversary, and his contributions therefore to the Indian national movement were acknowledged. So he was born back in 1878 in the ex-Madras province, which is of course the Tamil Nadu of today, and he was also really influenced and impacted by the 1905 partition of Bengal that was led by Lord Curzon. Now we all know about the partition of Bengal, of course, that comes from your modern history, and we know that Bengal was therefore divided in the east and the western provinces on a plea that it was too large to be administrated by the government alone successfully. Also, the government said that it's a large area and it has a lot of dacoity, waterways, so we have all the administrative problem, but in reality, it was the Indian nationalists who understood that the whole idea was not administration and ease of monitoring, it was all about creating a fracture in the rising Indian nationalism in that area. Now remember that Punjab and Bengal were two absolute nerve centers of Indian national movement. While we saw a lot of extremism associated with Punjab in the later years, but also because of the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy, I think post 1999, lots of military nationalism picked up there. But even in Bengal, from the very beginning, you had not only literary criticism of British activities, but people were very, very active in the national movement. So they saw it as a very good opportunity to break the Hindu-Muslim unity. And that was the whole reason behind partition of Bengal at that time. This was something that naturally angered Indian nationalists, and of course, C. Rajagopalachari ji was one of them. So he also therefore called for Lokmanya Tilak's help, and then he joined the Indian National Congress and became a very, very active participant in all the activities against the British Raj. He was also the chairman of a municipality in a small town in Tamil Nadu that's called Salem, very, very popular for a certain variety of mangoes, of course, export quality. You could definitely post in the comment box if you know, because as I always say, the beauty of history is with geography and vice versa. So then let's remember in 1925, he also established an ashram, a shelter, okay, in Madras province to promote welfare for the vulnerable people, and two magazines are associated with his name which you should know for the exams for sure. One, of course, is the Vimochanam, that was written in Tamil, and the other is Prohibition, that came out in English. And on that note, if I was to ask you that there were two languages which were created, even there were two linguistic magazines rather, that were created also by Lokmanya Tilak, and which were these languages? One was in Marathi and one was in English. Which were these? Good question, quite important for the exams. Please post the comment. Okay, so with this, another thing that we should know about is therefore his role in the freedom struggle. So he not only hosted Mahatma Gandhi during the anti-Rowlatt agitation. Now we all know about the Rowlatt Act, a very, very martial law created by the British government, under which they could not only do preventive detention of any Indian suspected of anti-Raj activities, but they could also take any kind of violent action. It was justified by the law of the government, by the order of the government. So against this harsh draconian law, it was many Indian nationalists who raised an alarm, and hence Mahatma Gandhi along with C. Rajagopalachari were quite prominent names here. Also, he led the Salt March in Madras when Mahatma Gandhi had called for the civil disobedience, the Salt movement, in 1931. Quite an important movement, of course. So C. Rajagopalachari was the regional head of the movement, talking about the Madras wing. Okay, now this came to be known as the Vedaranyam Satyagraha. Quite important, because you have many satyagrahas in Indian modern history that deserve a mention. Of course, you have the Salt Satyagraha of Mahatma Gandhi, but you have many more, okay, especially associated with the peninsular Indian region. So one of them is the Vedaranyam Satyagraha. So you should know it was happening in 1930 from Tiruchi to Vedaranyam. Essentially, it was a Madras-based salt march. Please remember the person associated with it. Quite important, direct question can come. Now, he also proposed the CR formula. Very, very important. He was the one who introduced the CR formula to solve the deadlock, to solve the crisis, to solve the argument between the Indian National League and the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League during the time when the constitution was still being created. And he was also the Prime Minister of Madras province back in 1937, where again he is very well known for implementing certain important land reforms. Now, if you remember, we have spoken about land reforms previously, that it was only in the period of 1945 onwards that the government was quite particular about initiating land reforms because of the British policies that had paralyzed Indian rural economy completely. So we had a very, very deep stratification system based on caste like Zamindari, Mehelwadi, Raiyatwadi, where all the rich landowners, the Zamindars, the intermediaries would collect heavy taxes from the people, pass it on to the government, enjoy a lot of return in benefit in return, and who was suffering? That was always the poor peasants who were experiencing a higher revenue every single day, and hence farmer suicides and peasant suffering was extremely common. There was famine and there was poverty too. So in that light, of course, all these people have done a major contribution by initiating land reforms that aimed at terminating systems like Zamindari, Mahalwadi, Rayatwadi, and enabling the real cultivators to have the ownership of land. Let's remember that. So he was also responsible for introducing land reforms. Of course, he spoke about implementing the khadi, okay, making cotton clothes by yourself, making khadi clothes by yourself, using the the mill, by your own hand, the charkha that Gandhiji had popularized. Of course, he stood against zamindari system. He was pro introducing Hindi as a language in various schools to promote national integration, and also definitely he spoke about improving the plight of the so-called Dalit segment, that's the backward caste segment. So he stood for caste equality too. And let's also remember that post-independence, of course, his movements were tremendous. I had spoken to you just recently about one party that he had created. It's a very prominent question for the prelims. Which party was that? So of course he founded the Swatantrata Party. That happened back in 1959, and he of course was a doyen of promoting economic liberalism and reduced government control over the market. So he was a very futuristic, he was a visionary when it comes to economic reform. Now something that actually started in India as late as 1991, when your liberalization, privatization and globalization, the LPG period kicked in. But he was one person who long back had spoken about minimal government interference and driving towards a more free market economy. Also, let's remember that he served as the governor of West Bengal. He was the first Indian governor general of independent India in 1947. That's really important. So if I was to ask you, whom did he actually succeed in office? Whom did he succeed? Who was before him? The Governor General of India. So let's see which answer do you give. Please post it in the comment box. If we study in a very quiz-like format, I think it becomes very interesting and then you don't forget. So please make sure you answer these questions so that I can get back to you and we can have such interesting discussions, and maybe the first 5 people who can comment are also people whose name we can read out, and we can definitely call you out there. So please keep your comments coming in. And now he also was somebody who spoke about championing global peace by leading a delegation, by leading a party to the US in 1962, advocating for nuclear test ban. So absolutely he was against any use of nuclear weaponry because he was a doyen of peace, as I just said, and he was therefore honored with Bharat Ratna, the highest Indian civilian honor, back in 1954. He became his first recipient. Now another very good question can be, along with him, who were the other first recipients of the Bharat Ratna, as it was first given in 1954? So we know now that of course C. Rajagopalachari ji was one. Who were the other 2 people who got Bharat Ratna, the highest Indian civilian award, back in 1954? Please post your comments. Let's see who posted first. Okay, so next person, the next visionary we are speaking about, who had definitely made tremendous contributions to India's social upliftment, was Shri Guru Nanak Dev Ji, and he is in news because we are talking about Guru Nanak Jayanti celebration, where we celebrate his 555th birth anniversary. He was indeed the founder of Sikhism. He was somebody who spoke about a religion that's completely based on peace, brotherhood, equality, no dogmas, no customs, and absolutely talking about humanity. And we are talking about philanthropy, we are talking about altruism, love for people. Okay, having said that, what more important things for the exam we could actually know about him? So one such important thing was that he was born in 1469, and a place that's now called as Nankana Sahib. It's near Lahore. Okay, and let's remember that he was the first of the 10 Sikh Gurus who gave the legacy of Sikhism. Very important. Another important thing is that he promoted interfaith dialogue. Now that's amazing, because I think if you talk about regular Indian rulers, then Akbar was somebody whom we should mention here, because he had often invited Portuguese and Dutch delegates into his court, and there he would at length talk about different religions, because he was very interested in finding a religion of humanity, okay, the Deen-e-Ilahi. And therefore he also had his Ibadat Khana, where he would call people from Sikh religion, from Christianity, from Hinduism, and he would just go on discussing with them that let's kind of share the ideas of different religions. So of course he was a ruler that's known for that. But here if you talk about spiritual guru, then of course Guru Nanak Ji was one such person who had spoken about interfaith dialogue, religious harmony among people, that people from different religions could absolutely come and converge their ideas. That was absolutely ahead of its times. It was very futuristic, talking of religious harmony. Today we talk about, in India, zonal councils. Today in India we often talk about promoting unity in diversity. So these were people who had done it way ahead, way before even the modern contemporary government can think about it. So he spread the message of Ek Omkar, that the God is one. Okay, so a very, very monotheistic appeal to people, something similar to what Raja Ram Mohan Roy would do when he had written his book called The Gift to Monothesis. So all these ideas, you will see various visionaries who've really made a massive contribution to religious unity. They've all spoken about one underlying theme, that no matter your religious worship forms could be diverse, but eventually the universal power that we worship is always one. So here we talk about the Omkar, that the God is one. Okay, next thing is he also advocated for an idea called Nirguna. Now, very often in your history textbook, specifically NCERT modern history, you will read words like Nirguna or Saguna. What are all these words? So, there was always this trend or this debate in Indian religious philosophy that God, whether God has a form or whether God has no visible form. Is God a very transcendent abstract reality, or no, God is a very tangible a reality that we can actually assume in a particular shape. So here Guru Nanak Dev Ji talk about the Nirguna aspect, where you worship in such a way that the God is formless. God cannot be reduced to a form. God is infinite, okay? So he did not like customs and traditions like doing rituals, offering sacrifices, or any particular kind of idol worship, because he said that if God is Nirguna, if the God is formless, he's abstract, then there's no need to express your faith in abstract manner either. It's very, very implied, it's very, very intangible. Now he established rules for worship by entire community called Sangat. Everybody, irrespective of their gender, their caste, their creed, would actually come and worship. Now again, this points out to another Indian reality. Say for example, if you were to tap into the data of the 2011 census, okay, so you'd realize that Punjab happens to be one of the places with the highest concentration of scheduled caste segment. So this points out to a bigger historical reality, that back when in the post-Vedic period the caste system had taken too bad toll on people, when there was too much division and too much hierarchy between different castes, and there was atrocity going on against the lower caste, particularly in rural India. That time Sikhism also became a great spiritual avenue for people who experienced caste exploitation to actually escape casteism and adapt Sikhism, which was a more universal religion. Something similar to what we witnessed in the case of Buddhism and Jainism as well. So something similar is witnessed here, that a lot of people were welcome to the religion, given that it did not differentiate on the basis of caste, race, gender or place of birth. So all the group could worship together. Community worship, community solidarity. Having said that, of course, he laid the foundation of three main pillars or ideas of Sikhism. One is the Naam Japna, which means chant the name of God. The other is Kirat Karni, which means be very honest in your demeanor. Do not be false or do not be fake. Be truthful. And then, of course, it's Vand Chakna, which means always share with others. The concept of communal living is being given importance to here. His writings have been compiled in the Adi Granth, which later became the Guru Granth Sahib, after further additions to it were made by Guru Gobind Singh Ji. So he eventually passed away in 1539 at Kartarpur in Punjab. Now the Kartarpur corridor, of course, often keeps making news. So whenever UPSC gives you a news piece as a question, you should know all the related details to that. Its historical evolution, its modern day relevance, its economic importance, its political importance, geographical situation. So always have that kind of 360-degree coverage of various issues, because that's eventually what helps you in answering these abstract questions of the prelims. Next, we are talking about a person whose name is very, very common, very, very popular, talking about the tribal struggle against British Raj. So we very often talk about movements such as the Santhal movement against too much land acquisition and atrocity by the British government. Okay. Then, of course, we talk about many important leaders, Siddhu, Kanu, but one such name which really stands tall here is the name of Birsa Munda. Now, he was almost such a tribal leader, an icon of tribal strength, that he actually led anti-British movement by mobilizing thousands of tribal with grit and courage. So here we celebrate the 150th birth anniversary of Birsa Munda, and the Department of Post also released a commemorative postage stamp to honor his legacy. A little bit about his background and then his contribution, very important for the exam, of course. And why is it even important in contemporary India? As I said, everything in UPSC is very related. So today also we talk about how tribals are experiencing segregation or separation. But sometimes we also talk about the government and its initiative towards tribals' upliftment. We talk about the debate between isolation of the tribal versus whether they should be assimilated. We talk about how tribal languages have acquired a new importance today. So, in that note, whenever we talk about tribal empowerment, we absolutely cannot neglect the national movement and their contribution. And here comes Birsa Munda as belonging to the Munda tribe of the Chota Nagpur plateau. Please open a map. Quickly open a map or an atlas that you have, and India's physical map would talk volumes about, you can spatially locate the Chota Nagpur plateau. So my recommendation to everyone is that whenever we talk about a personality, event, organization, always connect with a map, because once you start doing that, you take it in writing from me that all your life you are not going to forget about what we are discussing, and that's the beauty of map and geography and history going together. So please check in the map. We are talking about the mid part of India, the Chota Nagpur plateau, the centrally located plateau, and he was born in the modern day area of Jharkhand back in 1875. Now 1875 is a very important year in Indian history. Why? Of course, we talk about the birth of such a great revolutionary, Birsa Munda, but there's something else also that happened in 1875. Yes or no? Which organization was found towards Indian social reform? Please post it in the comment if you know it already. Otherwise, find out and let me know. So he received his education at a German missionary school, but that's what sowed the seeds of realization, because he realized that this education is so European in nature that it is completely devoid of Indian roots and Indian culture. He also saw this education to be an attempt at soft imperialism and colonization of minds, because this was completely in tune with British ideals. It was all about completely changing or converting the tribals into Christianity. It was an attempt at soft power by the British, and once he realized that, then he forced his peers and himself to actually stand up against self-identity protection. So he is associated with a very important notion called the Ulgulan. This Ulgulan is basically a kind of response towards aggressive and very, very repressive British land policies, because British had not only misused tribal labor, but they had also forced poor, bad, hierarchical, unfavorable land policies on the tribals by taking more than literally 1/6 of entire produce as tax, and it had further imposed very heavy fines on the tribals, so, and plus used them as forced labor either for free or for very less money, encroached the forests, removed the forests, and used the tribals badly, firstly to clear the forest and then to acquire their land forcefully. And against that, naturally the tribals were rising in a rebellion. So in response to the Munda rebellion, the British government therefore introduced the Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act of 1905, which then was there to protect the tribal land rights. The act then made it a rule that the tribal land would not be transferred to the non-tribals, and therefore it recognized the identity of these tribals and all their rights that the tribals have towards land, rivers, forests, trees, and all of that. Now, talking about the spiritual and religious role of Shri Birsa Munda, so he founded the Birsaite faith, where he blended two very famous forms of religion. One, of course, was indigenous beliefs, your local religion, your own belief system, plus animism. Now, animism is nothing new for India. So even when we talk about the Indus Valley Civilization, in fact, even before that, as we talk about the Neolithic or the Chalcolithic people in the prehistory, we often see that in India there was a trend of people who would worship non-living things, and they would associate spiritual elements to them. It's a very common form of tribal worship today as well, but don't get confused between totemism and animism. Now, these are slightly different things. Totemism we'll study when we talk about the tribal culture in detail, but talking of animism, it's completely like nature worship sometimes, that you believe that a tree has actually a very sacred element to it, or you believe that a stone is symbolic of a sacred power. So when you believe that thing, that material things could have spiritual powers and you worship them, you're almost being a nature worshipper there. So that was the kind of faith that he spoke about, because obviously it helps you to restore your ecology. A lot of people would wrongly believe, a lot of ethnographers would wrongly believe that animism and naturism is very primitive, but actually it's not. It's very futuristic, because unless you worship your nature, there's very little you would do to preserve your ecology. No wonder the Jarawa tribals of Andaman and Nicobar suspected a tsunami much before even the data could strongly suggest that a tsunami might come back in 2014. So all these things happen because association with nature sometimes gives you a lot of upper hand in dealing with natural calamities too. So hence, all the tribal religions give a lot of importance to nature worship. Similarly, they also spoke about worshipping single god. That was very, very futuristic. He speaks about worshipping a single god. And he advocated for a Munda Raj where people could self-govern, Swaraj. Not being governed by a non-tribal entity, but actually self-governance as per your practices and customs. He gave you the title of Dharti Abba, which means the land is your father, and that's the only thing you need to worship. And this would arouse these feelings of spirituality and nationalism among his followers. Now, his legacy, of course, is tremendous. He's left behind a major impact on the independence movement. The state of Jharkhand, along with Uttarakhand and Chhattisgarh, as it took birth in 2000, was again his aegis. It was his efforts that spoke out. And in 2021, the Indian government declared his birth anniversary as the Janjati Gaurav Divas. Now, this translates in English as the tribal pride day. Janjatiya means the tribal, Gaurav means the pride that you take in something, and of course Divas is the day. So that's a very special occasion where we talk about tribal supremacy and giving respect to tribal cultures. Now, of course, a little bit more about the Ulgulan. What do we really mean by the Ulgulan? So Ulgulan was actually a rebellion that was created via the tribals against the very oppressive zamindari system that was imposed on British on them. So I think in many lectures before we have spoken about various land revenue systems created by the British with only one purpose, that they would create a class of intermediaries, a class of brokers almost. These would be the zamindars, the landowners. They could be called rajas, they could be called anything like local lords or something. And these were the people who would collect high amount of revenues, land revenues from the poor cultivators, and then transmit it back to the British. British would keep a major chunk of it, and of course these zamindars, these intermediaries, would also keep some chunk of it. So both the classes prospered, but the tenants or the cultivators were the ones who were literally dying without any food. So this was a very exploitative system. Also, it spoke volumes about the caste division in India, because generally all the zamindars were all upper caste landowning people, as opposed to the poor cultivators who generally came from lower caste backgrounds or either tribal backgrounds. So obviously in Indian society, this was a very exploitative and ruthless economic system, whether it's zamindari or mahalwadi or rayyatwadi, depending in different regions. For example, Rayyatwadi was more predominant in the Maharashtra, modern day Telangana region. Mahalwadi could be seen more in eastern India. Zamindari, of course, with other chunks of northern Indian states. So the movement was against zamindari system, against the exploitation of zamindars, and they wanted the system to be replaced by the traditional Kunt Kati system, which meant that we do not have to pay a very high amount of rent, or too much exploitation should anyway be avoided. So restore the land to the tribals or to the cultivators directly was the demand. Now, Birsa Munda's leadership inspired a lot of resistance against the British. There were guerrilla attacks, there was extreme form of nationalism, there was military nationalism associated, there was strong courage displayed by the people in creating a chaos in British churches, police stations as an agitation move. And the rebellion obviously died down after Birsa Munda was arrested back in the 1900, and he actually died in British custody. Now the most shocking thing was that he was very, very young, at a very immature age of 25, and yet the contribution made by him has really molded Indian national movement in a major way. So very important figure to remember. And now we are talking about Rani Chennamma's victory over the British. It was recently celebrated. In fact, its 200th anniversary was celebrated. Now, talking about the women participation in national movement, very often in prelims you get important national movement figures, and then they just give you the name of the revolution that they launched or the organization that they created, and often you need to match the right pair, or you need to figure out which is false, which is true. Hence all the women contributors become important. Now, talking of the mains exam in GS paper 1 and 2, Indian society, social justice, there's a very clear segment which talks about which were the Indian women who made contributions avidly to the freedom struggle. Or sometimes they ask you, mention few Indian women national fighters, and they are talking about a generation which was way before the contemporary freedom fighters like Sarojini Naidu, or say Aruna Asif Ali, or when we talk about all other modern day contributors. So we are talking about way before. And here comes the name of Rani Chennamma. So Rani Chennamma was actually born in Karnataka in the Belagavi district back in 1778. So imagine this has happened even way before we talk about Rani Lakshmi Bai ji, okay? It was way before India's first war of independence, that's 1857. This is even before. And she had married the Maharaja or the king of Kittur, okay? The Malas Raja of Kittur, Raja Malas Raja. And then their son actually, who was named as Shivling Garudra Sarja, he had become the king. But when the son died in 1824, then naturally it was a step by the British government to annex Indian territories. And you all know about Lord Dalhousie. You all know about the doctrine of lapse created by him, in fact, which was also responsible for many other states that they tried to acquire, like, you know, Satara, Jhansi and all of that. So similar thing happened here also, that once the queen adopted a child, then it was not approved by the British, because British East Indian Company imposed the very infamous law called doctrine of lapse, according to which if a king and a queen do not have their own child, so their adopted child will not be given any right to ascend to the throne, and the territory would pass to the British. In fact, Lord Dalhousie had also once said in a very mocking way that Awadh is going to be the last cherry in our mouth, because we will capture one by one all territories that belong to India, either through subsidiary alliance or through doctrine of lapse. All these were systems of land annexation by the British, we know. So in 1824, British soldiers therefore came and they just barged in the territory of Kittur Fort, okay, led by John Thackeray. And then what happened? Rani Chennamma, rather than being coy about it or being scared, she actually showed tremendous brevity, and she, to defend her land, led a very fierce battle with these people. She was a great fighter, great leader, absolutely ahead of her times, because she employed guerrilla warfare tactics much before any other Indian kingdom actually did. And she also emerged successful in this fight against British. Now that is absolutely historical, and her legacy was that despite later being caught and imprisoned by the British, the Rani's spirit remained strong. She kept on inspiring other Indian freedom fighters to fight against the British rule. In 2007, the government had also honored her by issuing a stamp, postage stamp in her name. So a little bit quick about doctrine of lapse. As I just said, it was a policy that was introduced by Lord Dalhousie during his regime from 1848 to 1856, right before the 1857 revolt, in fact. And under this policy, the East India Company said that if you do not have a legal male child of your own, then your territory would be taken away by the British, and your adopted son would not even get to rule that. So they were on and on capturing various Indian states like Satara, as I said, Jaipur, Sambhalpur, Bhagat, Udaipur, Jhansi, Nagpur. All of these came under the British control only because of this ill-structured policy. And the fight of Kittur Chennamma again reminds us of how Indians stood strong against such an exploitative treaty of the government. Now, having said this, now we talk about the freedom fighter Shyamji Krishna Varma. Oh, very famous name, especially when we talk about extreme nationalism in India. So he was given tribute to recently by the Indian Prime Minister on his birth anniversary. Now quickly let's talk about some of his key achievements. And he was actually born in a very small town in Gujarat's Kutch region back in the 1857, that we associate with the revolt period also. And he was influenced by huge icons of national pride like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, of course Herbert Spencer. Now Herbert Spencer might look a little offbeat here, but Herbert Spencer, let's remember, was one such scientist or evolutionary scientist who had earlier studied thoroughly under Charles Darwin the theory of evolution of human species, survival of the fittest, and then later, inspired by social sciences, he used all the philosophy, all the logic of science into studying social sciences like history, sociology, and psychology and all that. So his name again stands tall because he was one person who had given a lot of importance to understanding social problems with the help of tools from science. Okay, he had a very positivistic belief system in social studies. So he of course inspired Shyamji Krishna Varma, and then later he established the Indian Home Rule Society in India House in London. Very important. From the examination point of view, very important, because there are many organizations which share a similar name. Now, they could ask you about the Indian Home Rule League. One was by Annie Besant, another one was by Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Again, now we are not talking about the Home Rule League. We are talking about Indian Home Rule Society. Then, of course, there was another one that was founded by Gopal Krishna Gokhale. and another one by somebody else. So, these are very confusing names, but they're very important for you. Later, of course, there was one East India Association also by Dadabhai Naoroji. So, please be very cautious about these, because in prelims you can get these overlapping questions. So, make sure we are talking about Indian Home Rule Society by Shyamji Krishna Burma. And as I said, he was influenced by Herbert Spencer, who's a key sociologist and biologist. He also started publishing the Indian Sociologist. Okay, so it was a monthly publication by this title. Now, having said that, he became the first president of Bombay Arya Samaj. Remember, just few slides back I had asked you a question. Something else also happened in 1875. What was that? I'm giving you a hint. Can you post it in the comment box quickly? What was that? Okay, so he was the president of the Bombay Arya Samaj, and of course he was influencing many other rising leaders like Veer Savarkar. Having said that, he was also a diwan, a ruler mainly in many Indian states. And let's remember that from a lot of accusation by the British government for doing sedition activities, anti-Raj activities, and constantly he was under the scanner by the British government. And facing all these problems, he actually moved from London to Paris. But then he did not stop his national efforts. That's the more important thing. So during the World War I, he actually went to Switzerland, and until he passed away in 1930, he kept on making contributions to Indian national movement, either through his ideas or sometimes through sending secret funds to Indian revolutionaries. So his tremendous was, of course, quite memorable there. And now we are talking about Jayaprakash Narayan, again very crucial name. Of course, if you study contemporary Indian politics, you will see so much on him. And we are saying how the Prime Minister has recently paid tribute to Jayaprakash Narayan on his birth anniversary. So talking about him, born in 1902, he was actually a Marxist in his ideas. So he had a very left orientation in his ideas. He was inspired by the ideas of socialism, communism, and during his time, he was also, along with ideas of Marxism, highly inspired by Gandhian ideology. Peace, non-violence, simplicity, self-rule, and all of that. So what did he really contribute in terms of freedom struggle? Well, so much in 1929. Now 1929 is a very memorable year for Indian history, because also we talk about the Lahore session. We talk about the time when Indian National Congress had declared actually a Sampurna Swaraj or complete independence as one of its main agendas. Okay, so remember that. Now, having said that, in 1929 he joined the Indian National Congress, and he was also imprisoned back in 1932 for participating in the civil disobedience movement. Now, having said that, in 1939 he was once again sent to prison for opposing India's involvement in the World War I. The World War II on the British side, but he somehow managed to escape there. Now he played a major role in forming the Congress Socialist Party back in 1934. Very important, because as I said, he was a believer of Marxian ideas, a left-wing politician. So this Congress Socialist Party of 1934 also resonates with the left-wing faction, left-wing group within the Congress Party. Apart from that, during the post-independence era, he had started the anti-Congress campaign, quite unhappy with the socialistic leanings of the Congress Party, dissatisfied on that front. He joined the anti-Congress campaign, and then in 1952, very important to remember, please, it's a super important point, he established the Praja Socialist Party, the PSP party. Now recently we discussed about the Swatantrata Party. Now we are talking about the Praja Socialist Party. So these names are very crucial, please. Having said that, he also made efforts to contribute to Vinoba Bhave's Bhudan Yajna movement. Bhudan movement, the bloodless revolution of giving land to the needy. That's important. And all was done in a very socialistic way to redistribute land to the poor and the needy. Now in 1959, he also stood for reconstruction, completely a revamping of Indian polity, and he spoke about a 4-tier system, a 4-layer system of the administration, known as the village, district, state and union councils, known as the Chaukhumba Raj. Chaukhumba means the governance by 4 levels. Quite important to remember. Anytime you could get a question which associates the idea of Chaukhumba Raj with somebody, and that person is Jayaprakash Narayan. Of course, you could get a direct question on Praja Socialist Party too, so be very watchful there. Now, talking about another revolution associated with him, this is the total revolution. Please don't forget, very important for the exam. He also encouraged a revolution encompassing 7 areas, 7 domains, 7 ideas. One was political, social, economic, cultural, social, and educational, spiritual change within the Indian society. The aim was therefore to create a holistic and all-round progress as envisaged under the Gandhian ideal, because Gandhiji would often talk about empowering village republics, self-rule. Gandhiji would talk about holistic education, multidisciplinary education, women empowerment, anti-caste protest, of course truth and non-violence. So all those were encompassed into his total revolution ideas. Similarly, he also was one of the voices when Indira Gandhi actually had elected one of the persons by surpassing the hierarchy of the courts, and then she had elected somebody else as the main position holder in the Allahabad, in one of the courts in India. So therefore, to protest against that kind of injustice, to protest against that kind of a regime, arbitrary amendments to the constitution under Indira Gandhi regime, emergency period. So it was also him, Jayaprakash Narayan, who had also voiced against Indira Gandhi in the Allahabad High Court. Apart from that, there was one more important person. If you know the name, do post it in the comment box, please. Interesting to know. Now, having said that, in 1974, he also called for Sampurna Kranti, total revolution, complete revolution. And under this, he was campaigning against corruption, bureaucratic red tapeism, complete, you can say, opacity or the lack of transparency in political governance. So he spoke about political social transformation. 1999, he was awarded Bharat Ratna posthumously. That's after he died. And because of his immense contribution to the freedom struggle and towards creating an equitable socialistic society, his name is recognized and edged high in India's socialistic revolution. Now, talking about V.O. Chidambaram Pillai, he was also recently commemorated, remembered, honored on his birth anniversary. Talking more about the leader, he was actually born in 1872 in Tamil Nadu, the modern day Tamil Nadu region, and he actually also entered politics during the backlash of the Lord Curzon-led partition of Bengal in 1905, which we just spoke about recently. Now, by the end of the year, he became very closely associated with the Swadeshi movement. Now, we all know about Swadeshi boycott movements. We all know that during the time of partition of Bengal in 1905, it was many people, of course, led by extremists like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, who would talk about celebrating Ganpati festivals, taking river Ganga ablutions, celebrating the Devi festivals, Shivaji Maharaj festivals. Why? In order to inculcate a sense of pride among Indians. They also spoke about using everything that's made in India. The self rule campaign, the Swaraj campaign, the home movement, and they also were completely against using of anything that's foreign. So eventually the boycott movement also became a part and parcel of Swadeshi movement. Okay, so V.O. Chidambaram Pillai also joined the movement. He then later founded the Ramakrishna Mission, let's remember. And this he built with Subramanya Bharati, and he was the first Indian to run a Swadeshi ship back in 1906. Now, quite important, because today we are talking about navigation. Today we are talking about the role of India's indigenous companies in especially river water navigation. Now recently, just 1 or 2 years before, the Ganga cruise ship, the Ganga river cruise ship was in news because the Ganga dolphins were getting endangered by that ship. So just to remind you of that event, many indigenous companies are now taking to navigating, cruising the waterways. So on that light, it's very good to remember in that backdrop that he was the first Indian to run an Indian ship back in 1906. He is known as the Kapalotia Tamilan, which means he was somebody who is known as the Tamil helmsman. Also, he was also considered as a very noble scholar, a very high achieving scholar, and he founded many institutions such as the Swadeshi Prachar Sabha to propagate the ideas of Swadeshi boycott, the National Go Down, of course the Desa Bimana Sangam, and let's also remember that he was also associated with the Tuticorin coral mill strike in 1908 against labor abuse, exploitation, and when Gandhiji had started the Champaran Satyagraha in 1917, V.O. Chidambaram Pillai had highlighted the problems of labourers and working class in Tamil Nadu much before even Gandhiji spoke about the Champaran Satyagraha. So he also authors many works, and I think few are very important to remember for the exam perspective. One, of course, is the Meyaram. Direct questions can be expected definitely. Then of course another is Meya Rivu. Then we talk about the Thirukural by Mana Kudavar. This is quite important, and at the end of the day his autobiography was also created. So just his major contributions and few books would be sufficient. Now speaking about that, if we talk about how Maharashtra government has recently approved a proposal to change the name of Pune airport as Jagat Guru Sant Tukaram Maharaj Pune International Airport. So because of this development, the personality of Sant Tukaramji Maharaj comes under news, and let's remember that he was a 17th century Varkari saint and a Marathi poet. And he's highly respected in the Maharashtra region, major figure in Bhakti movement. Now, Bhakti movement, Sufi movement, all once again alternate forms of worship that we often speak about. Now, we also know that many of the movements had actually spread towards peninsular India, and the good thing about Bhakti and Sufi movement, the most memorable thing is that not only did it have saints from different religious beliefs, but also saints from different parts of India. So one such person was Sant Tukaram, fondly known as Tukoba or Tukobaraya. His spiritual teachings, devotional poems teach people the path of pure love towards God. No dogma, no tradition, no strict following of rules, just love towards God and pure worship and belief in God. So let's just quickly see the important contributions from exam perspective. So these would be Abhanga poetry, very important because he's very well known for his Abhanga poetry, which means spiritual themes are entwined with folk stories and praising Lord Vithal, the incarnation of Lord Vishnu. Very important. Again, they talk about the worship and love towards God, which is imbibed as a value in Bhakti tradition. Then we talk about kirtan, singing songs, moving from one place to another just to be lost in that devotional aspect of worship. Again, no dogmas, no strict rules to be followed, pure love and open to everybody equally. No caste divide, no gender divide, no religion divide. Then we talk about the Tukaram Gatha. It is one of the most important celebrated work, Tukaram Gatha, back in 1632. It contains about more than 4,500 abhangas, poems, and these are quite important because they reflect the Varkari sect practices and customs. Very simple, very plain, but yet it contains them. And from the exam point of view, please, you could be asked a question on Abhanga poetry tradition, definitely about the Varkari sect. So these two I am giving you a special highlight. Always remember them before the exam. Just these two things I'm talking about. Okay, then talking about his philosophy. Of course, his philosophies were influenced by earlier Bhakti saints like Namdev and Kabir ji, Eknath, and it was completely a philosophy rooted in Vedanta, pretty much like Swami Vivekananda ji, Ramakrishna mission, and it spoke about equality among people, compassion, kindness and love towards people, and social reform based on belief in God. Caste-less society was what he propagated for. Again, he stood against caste discrimination in a major way. And his form of bhakti again was very democratic because it included and invited everyone. So women, people from all the castes, and rich and the poor, north people, people from peninsular regions, tribals, everyone could equally come and participate in the worship system. And now we talk about such illuminary whose name needs no introduction. Yes, we are talking about the greatest ever freedom fighters Bhagat Singh ji, and it was September 2024 when his birth anniversary was commemorated and he was honored by the Indian government. So the more important things from the exam perspective we could capture, because overall he is such an important contributor that everything about him is worth understanding and knowing. But then let's be very exam focused, and therefore let's remember that he was originally named as Bhaganwala, and of course he belonged to Punjab, born in 1907, just 2 years after partition of Bengal actually happened. And he also has a very interesting temporal space in Indian history. When I say temporal space, I mean he came at a very interesting time period where extreme phase of Indian national movement was actually just coming to an end, and a very very Gandhian tendency was actually erupting in Indian national freedom. So remember, these are two different ends aimed at the same thing. On the one hand, we have a very non-violent, a very truth-based satyagraha of Mahatma Gandhi that became predominant only as Gandhiji came to India in 1914 to 1915 period. Okay. But much before that, we also know that during the partition of Bengal, the immediate after years were full of extreme nationalism. When we talk about Lal Bal Pal, their contributions, and many other extreme freedom fighters. So he came at such an interesting time that his personality was basically a mix of, influenced by both these tendencies. Now, interesting thing is that he studied in the National College of Lahore, and it was an institution actually founded by Lala Lajpat Rai and Bhai Parmanand. Why? Because it became a very alternative system of education to all the institutions which were being run by the government. Because government run institutions would never teach Indian youth the value of Swadeshi, local, Indian culture and pride in it. But these institutions would do that. These were national college it was. And hence Bhagat Singh was socialized from the very beginning in love towards his country, commitment towards freedom struggle. So his is a very important role in the Hindustan Republican Association. Now here also let's not get confused because there are many names associated with these organizations. Okay, so a lot of questions are based on these very very common questions like who were the members, and they can just confuse you with the names. They could give you a confusion between HRA and HSRA. Very common confusion that happens in prelims questions. So please understand that by 1924, Bhagat Singh had joined the Hindustan Republican Association, the HRA, in Kanpur, which was actually, the HRA was started by Sachindranath Sanyal. There was a very famous book written by Sachindranath Sanyal. Can anybody tell me the name? It was a beautiful, beautiful book, touching book absolutely, written by Sachindranath Sanyal. The name was in Hindi, in which he captures the life of a captive in a prison. Beautiful. Just let me know the name. If not, you should know the name. Okay, so do let me know. I'll be waiting for your comment. Let me know. So now Bhagat Singh ji became the main organizer of HRA. Of course, Chandrashekhar Azad became a very close ally and associate of him. And as a member of HRA, they adopted the philosophy of the bomb. Now, very important to know because they understood that without a strong action, the British government would never really respect anything towards giving India freedom. And hence, they took up two weapons in order to ask for their rights. Now, this was an ideology initially articulated by Bhagwati Charan Vora, quite an extremist ideology, but again, it's a need of the time also because given the atrocities of the British towards Indians, a lot of these people who came from this ideology believed that without showing might, the British government would never recede. And hence, they took up to this kind of extreme form of nationalistic expression, or patriotism rather. So in 1925, as Bhagat Singh returned to Lahore, he also founded another organization called the Naujawan Bharat Sabha. Very important pointer for the exam, questions can be based on that. Naujawan Bharat Sabha. Now, talking about the Hindustan Socialist Republic Association, please remember, a year later in 1928, Bhagat Singh ji renamed the HRA into HSRA. So don't get confused there. Initial organization was founded by Sri Sachindranath Sanyal, whose book name I have asked you. Then later in 1928, Bhagat Singh named HRA into HSRA, the Hindustan Socialist Republic Association, in 1930 after the death of Chandrashekhar Azad, who was captured by the British in a public park in Allahabad, Prayagraj actually. HRSA had collapsed, and then the Naujawan Sabha became more famous and active organization in Punjab area. Now let's understand that in response to the death of Lala Lajpat Rai, who died because he was hit very badly by one stick of the British government as they were doing peaceful protest, and yet the British hit him. It was hit by a soldier, and he became paralyzed all his life and eventually died in a painful way. Now, to actually retaliate against that, Bhagat Singh and his associate killed J.P. Saunders. It was not a planned murder, but it happened. And a police officer by the name of J.P. Saunders got killed, and this then became the Lahore conspiracy case of 1929. And eventually, therefore, Bhagat Singh and B.K. Batukeshwar Dutt, they were the ones who threw a bomb in Central Legislative Assembly to protest against two very, very oppressive bills of the British government, Public Safety Bill and Trade Dispute Bill, which gave the British government too much right to arrest any Indian without much investigation. But they did not plan to kill anybody. It was just to bring attention to their voice, but unfortunately it backfired, and eventually both the people were later arrested in bomb making, murdering of J.P. Saunders, and then they were hanged alongside two other young revolutionaries, Sukhdev and Rajguru, in 1931 in Lahore. So this was a very memorable event in Indian history, also brought a close to a very, very vigorous phase of military nationalism in India. Now, talking about the books penned by him, why am I an atheist? Now, atheist is somebody who does not believe in God. It's very opposite of the word ascetic. Don't get confused. Ascetic is somebody who's too much believer in religion, simple person, spiritual person. Talking about atheist, it is somebody who would not believe in a fixed religion. Okay, and an autobiographical discourse and the jail notebook. Oh, beautiful. You must remember both these names. Very important names to remember, because questions definitely can be focused on that. Now, with this, we talk about the death anniversary of Shri Bal Gangadhar Tilak that was observed recently. Again, one of the trios, the Lal Bal Pal trio that we talk about. Once again, extreme nationalism in India. Talking about Bal Gangadhar Tilak, I had recently asked you a question that which two books did he write? Let's see whether we find the answer now. So he was born in Ratnagiri, Maharashtra in 1856, just 1 year before the revolt of 1857. And as a freedom fighter, lawyer, he is known as Lokmanya Tilak. Why? Because Lok means public, Manya means you're getting a lot of recognition among people, and hence rather than his own name Bal Gangadhar Tilak, people would lovingly call him Lokmanya Tilak because of the popularity and love that people had for him. Now, he founded the Deccan Education Society in 1884, just 1 year before what happened? If I say that he co-founded the Deccan Education Society in 1884, this was just 1 year before another very important development in Indian history. One organization was founded in 1885, right? At Bombay. Which organization was that? If we do not know it, we must know it, and if we do, we should share it in comment, because I think you know it. So post a comment, come on. You can put it on the live chat, you can post it in the comment box. You must do it, else we would never know. Comment it and I'll definitely announce loudly the first 5 people who do that. Okay, let me see how many people get back. So in 1884, he founded this society along with Gopal, Ganesh, Aghakar and others. Now, having said that, he was also one of the co-founders of Ferguson College in Pune. It's very popular, established in 1885 through the Deccan Education Society. Let's talk a little bit about his beliefs and ideologies. So he used Hindu scriptures to inspire people to take pride in their motherland and hence fight the British. As I said earlier, he organized Ganesh Chaturthi festivals, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj birth anniversary, taking bath in Ganga water, his very famous slogan, Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it, inspired people through ranks and files of India to come and fight with the British. Politically, he was also an advocate of complete independence or complete Swaraj or self-rule. So he was very against the moderate ideology that had dominated the Indian National Congress in the early years. Okay, until 101 or something, or until 1900, the ideology that dominated was that, especially led by W.C. Banerjee, Dadabhai Naoroji. So all these people, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, these people would say that you could pacify the British, you could do armchair activism, you could request them to do a legislation in your favor and we'll cooperate with the British. So people like Bal Gangadhar Tilak were against that. They said that there's no pacification and no pacification will help. Absolutely, freedom is a birthright and we have to take it from them. It's not like we can't keep requesting them for it, okay? So as I said, therefore he was also a part of the Lal Pal Bal trio along with Lala Lajpat Rai and Bipin Chandra Pal. He did join the Indian National Congress in 1890, and since his joining, of course, the moderate ideology slowly eventually moved towards a more extremist nationalistic ideology. He advocated for boycotting foreign goods, taking pride in Swadeshi goods manufactured in India. Of course, when I say that there was a Home Rule League movement, many people would argue it was Annie Besant. Yes, it was. But there was another Home Rule League movement that was initiated in 1916 in which Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who is a very active participant, in fact, both the Home Rule Leagues by either of the two eventually worked together in cooperation and close liaison with each other. So it was modelled after the Irish Home Rule League. And the movement was trying to capture the attention of educated English-speaking Indians to work towards self-rule in India. So he founded the All India Home Rule League in 1916 at Belagaon, in Maharashtra. Now, Eventually, when Lucknow Pact had happened in 1916, now we should know about the Surat split also when we talk about the Lucknow Pact. Now we know that back in 1907, there was a fight that had happened between the moderate wing and the extremist wing of the Congress in Surat. Okay, so after that fight, after years of being very antagonistic to each other, it was back in 1916 that eventually both the factions, the extremist and the moderate, came and joined hands. They became friends one again, they reconciled, and this became the Lucknow Pact 1916. Here, the agreement was led by Lokmanya Tilak and the All India Muslim League, and of course between Muhammad Ali Jinnah and by Lokmanya Tilak, it was a joint pact to promote not only the extremist moderate unity but also Hindu-Muslim unity to improve the overall performance of the national struggle. Now, having said that, he was also imprisoned many times, specifically 1908 to 1914 in Mandalay, one of the most secluded prisons, for defending revolutionary actions of Khudiram Bose and Praful Chakki. Well, this was another very important incident in which one cart was going, and both the people, Khudiram Bose and Praful Chakki, had thrown a bomb into it, and unfortunately, instead of the targeted person, his family, somebody else had lost their life, and hence they were very strictly imprisoned and punished by the British government. One had committed suicide, in fact. So it was support towards these people showed by Tilak that led him to imprisonment, and it was unfortunate that such a massive freedom fighter, himself had experienced a lot of atrocity by the British government in the prison. Now, having said that, let's see which books did he write. So the question I asked you is being self-answered now, that he founded the weeklies publications Kesari. This was written in Marathi language, and the other was Maratha. That was written in English language. Okay, must remember for the exam. Definitely questions can be based here. Now, he authored books such as Gita Rahasya, and another very important book of his that many people do not know about, but certainly a question can come in the prelims. Please remember that book. This is known as Arctic Home of the Vedas. Now, you might remember that when we talk about the ancient history of India, a lot of people keep making speculations. A lot of people have an intellectual debate about origins of the Aryans, that where exactly did they come from? Was it Central Asia, as touted in the textbooks, or were they actually the native inhabitants of India, or exactly what was the origin, or were they the later groups of people from the Indus Valley Civilization who survived? So here Bal Gangadhar Tilak ji had a very different idea. He said that the Aryans had come from Arctic area. So, Arctic Home of the Vedas, that was very interesting. So, you should remember this book, okay? And then Gita Rahasya. So, he passed away in 1920 eventually. Also, a very important period in Indian history, because it was right during this time that non-cooperation movement had caught up strong pace under the leadership of Gandhiji, only to be cancelled in 1922 because of the Chauri Chora incident. So, always keep it in a chronology and then you will remember better. Now, having said that, we talk about Madam Bikaji Kama, again a brilliant woman, a revolutionary, a doyen of women empowerment, and how she supported Indian national movement despite being outside the Indian soil. And yes, she was a freedom fighter, revolutionary freedom fighter, and recently she was remembered on her death anniversary. Now, Madam Bikaji Kama was somebody who had relocated, who had gone to Paris, okay, where she established the Paris Indian Society. Very important, along with Burjoji Godrej and S.R. Rana. Quite an important organization, because all these organizations which were created outside India are also important. Just now we spoke about the East India Association. We recently spoke of another association that was created by, please remember the name. Similarly, now we have the Paris India Association by Madam Bikaji Kama. Very important. In 1915, she was arrested for attempting to encourage Indian soldiers to incite a revolution in France, okay, and for that she was again exiled. She was sent away from there into the Caribbean. She was secluded, she was exiled there, punished there. So she also wrote many books to promote Indian freedom fight, to promote Indian national movements, such as Paris edition of Bande Matram, again which meant that she was encouraging nationalism despite being physically, spatially away from India, and of course Madan's Talwar. Then let's remember that she tried to spread information about the problems of Indian revolutionaries abroad, in outside circles, in among the circles of non-resident Indians and foreigners. She was trying to gain sympathy and purpose for their cause. Also, sometimes she tried to gather financial support so that the finance, the arms, ammunitions, and other needs of the freedom fighters could be fulfilled. So she was coordinating all those activities, and hence a very important, albeit women revolutionary, so a must mention name talking about women contribution in freedom struggle. And with that, the next personality we are referring to is Raghoji Bhangre, and we are talking about the Ministry of Tribal Affairs recently having honored his name. And he was a tribal revolutionary leader coming from the Koli community in Maharashtra. He was born in Ahmednagar. Let's remember that his father Ramji Rao Bhangre was also known for leading the Koli revolution against the money lenders' atrocities on the poor cultivators, and also against the British rule parallelly. Even when we talk about the Rayatwadi system in the south, many revolutions had taken place in the Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana region against the British and the money lenders, and all the account books of the money lenders were burnt as a part of these movements by the tribals and by the poor cultivators, just as a retaliation to the economic exploitation and very high rentals that they had to pay on the land and the produce. So having said that, Raghoji Bhangre continued his father's legacy of fighting the British community as a very integral part and the leader of Koli community against colonial exploitation, against colonial land revenue system and the money lender class. And later he was captured in 1847 and subsequently hanged by the British government. But a quick word about the Koli uprising. Let's remember it took place in Ahmednagar in Maharashtra in the Taranga Hills. Okay, a region also that comes from Gujarat. Now let's remember he led a revolt against the British Raj and local money lenders of Ahmednagar, because the money lenders would actually take advantage of the debt crisis experienced by the poor cultivators. Now they had to pay a very high amount of revenues to the government or to the money lender, or no, or to the zamindari class or the middle class. It would be collected in a very extreme manner. Harsh punishments would be met. And when these people were not able to make up for that money, they had to take some loan from the money lenders, and money lenders would do it very arbitrarily. They would put a high interest rate, they would keep harassing them, they would keep troubling them. And then eventually, to retaliate with this kind of exploitation, the Koli uprising also targeted the money lender class as one of the main, you can say, people who had caused this kind of a crisis in the first place. Now having said that, later disputes over lands, dispute over fines, taxes kept on continuing, and eventually many people from Koli community, say 500 to 600 rebels, they, like Govind Rao Khetri, they attacked money lenders in the Alok Hill region, and they completely destroyed, as I was mentioning to you earlier, they burnt all the ledgers and the account books just as a retaliatory measure. They completely finished that institutional system, and they were since very poorly impacted by the British. It became their loud cry against British economic atrocity. But since they did not get as much support as they expected, numerically also the number of rebels were not so much, the British were ultimately able to crush and suppress the revolt. Now with that, we talk about Dr. Kadambini Ganguli, a very important name, again related to not only women empowerment, but also we talk about social contribution of women in a big way, because we celebrate her birth anniversary recently, and she was known as the first Indian woman to actually become a doctor, a medical practitioner. So she was born in a small village in Bihar and started her education, a very humble education, and later she also became the first woman actually, to pass the University of Calcutta entrance examination in 1878 while she was still studying at the Bethune School. Now let's remember that when we talk about the first women doctors, here the name of people like Anandi become very prominent. She was one such person who became the first doctors from India, and Dr. Anandibai. And when we talk about Kadambini Ganguli, so she was also the first doctor in the sense that she achieved a very high academic qualifications, almost like she did a doctorate and research by passing a university despite being a woman. And we're talking about a woman taking to higher education at a period of time where women weren't even allowed primary and secondary education. So she was a doctor in the sense of completing a research degree. Okay, so let's proceed with her. And she was the first Indian woman to get admission in the Calcutta Medical College in 1884. So quite interesting, a very important achievement. A significant contribution was that she was one of the 6 representatives of the first female delegation in 1889 from the Indian National Congress. She also was instrumental, she had a major contribution in getting the India's first Age of Consent Act passed in 1891. When we say age of consent, it meant about raising the marriageable age of girls. So to protect them from any kind of sexual domestic abuse. She also organized Women Conference in Calcutta in 1906. That was done to retaliate against the partition of Bengal of 1905. And let's also understand that not only was she one of the first female graduates of the country, but she was also a member of the Brahmo Samaj. Now, Brahmo Samaj associated with Raja Ram Mohan Roy of 1828. Now she, along with Kamini Roy, worked as a woman member of the Samaj, and she was also inquiring about the situation of women coal mine workers in Bihar and Odisha who were caught up in a very, very exploitative working system. Now, having said that, we now talk about Chandrashekhar Azad, that how he was recently commemorated on his birth anniversary. So, talking about Chandrashekhar Azad, again it's a very well-known name. He was born in Alirajpur district of Madhya Pradesh, and his association with the non-cooperation movement started at a very young age, say at the age of 15. A movement started by Mahatma Gandhi, which meant non-cooperating at all with the British government in any of the civil matters of the government. We are not cooperating, we are withdrawing from everything that's involved with the government participation. So he was completely a participant in that, and for which he was also arrested at again a very young age. But he brought before a magistrate when he was taken to a magistrate post his arrest. His name was Azad, the free. Okay, and his father's name, he said, was Independence, and he said that he lives as a residence in jail, and eventually he got the name, or he got the title of Chandrashekhar Azad because of his extreme patriotism. And now with that, let's remember that after the non-cooperation movement was suspended, as we were discussing the Chauri Chaura episode that happened, in which some Indians were involved in some violent tussle with the police officers, some police station was burnt, and because it was a violent step taken within the non-cooperation movement, Mahatma Gandhi decided to withdraw and suspend the movement in February of 1922. So then Chandrashekhar Azad therefore joined the Hindustan Republican Association, which we just spoke about, which was started by Sachindranath Sanyal. Remember, I had also asked you the name of the book that he wrote, which later was rechristened to Hindustan Socialist Republic Association by Bhagat Singh Ji. So he joined that organization because he is also a prominent revolutionary leader. Military nationalism comes in picture here, remember. So then he joined this, and then in 1924 he also met other like-minded revolutionary freedom fighters like Narendra Mohan Sen, Pratul Ganguly, and all these people who had initially worked in the Anushilan Samiti, another very important organization from East India that was working towards military nationalism. So later, some other revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Ram Prasad Bismil, again his name is very close to HSRA, and Roshan Singh, Asfullah Khan, and Rajendra Lahiri, all the important revolutionary leaders from India. Very crucial, very important to remember their organization and their contributions. Any question can be framed out of that. So to fund their revolutionary activities, all these people were involved in a train robbery. So they looted a train that was known as the Kakodi train robbery that happened near Lucknow in Uttar Pradesh back in 1925. So initially it was conducted by the efforts of Chandrashekhar Azad, and of course people such as Ram Prasad Bismil, Asfullah Khan, and Rajendra Lahiri, and all these people were supporting him in the endeavor. So in 1828, HRA, once it was renamed to HSRA by Bhagat Singh at Firoz Shah Kotla in New Delhi, all these people planned the assassination of British policeman J.P. Saunders in Lahore, as we just discussed, because of the death of Lala Rajpat Rai in the Simon Commission controversy, that as he was peacefully retaliating, he was hit by a stick, and eventually he became incapacitated, and eventually he succumbed to his injuries and died. To retaliate, these people were planning the killing of J.P. Saunders. But much before that, actually, when HRSA could actually achieve all of its objectives, in 1931 itself, he was ambushed by the British police, and he was therefore executed there in Allahabad, that's Prayagraj. So now the next personality we talk about is Sant Kabir Das from 1398 to 1518 period, and let's remember it is happening, it is in the news because the Prime Minister recently had paid tribute to the saint, and he was a very revered, a very worshipped and honored 15th century Indian poet and saint, his birth anniversary being celebrated recently. Now Kabir Das ji was born in Varanasi, Uttar Pradesh, and although he was born in a Muslim family, but he was raised by a very humble Hindu family, and therefore he believed in both the religions, and he was somebody who believed in uniformity and harmony among religions. He initiated himself into the Bhakti movement, completely believing in devotion and following God with love, and he also got guidance from leaders such as Sheikh Taki. He also was somebody who was a very active, you could say, propagators of the Bhakti movement of 7th century, and as it spread into North and South India much later in 14th-15th century, he emphasized on hymns, kirtans, walking in the company of people, sangat, that is the congregation of other disciples, and in a very simple form of non-traditional, non-customary worship. That was what his belief was, and he advocated the Nirguna path. Again, we are talking about same thing, Nirguna path, as we saw in the case of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, where God is shapeless, formless. He's an abstract idea that you worship with complete spiritual love and devotion. And then he was also opposing idol worship. So he believed in, again, abstract universal power. He believed in serving of people. He believed in equality among people. He was also somebody who believed in the Kabir Panthi, which means that all the people who followed him, coming from whether Hinduism or Islam, they actually created a kind of following known as Kabir Panth, the path shown by Sant Kabir. His contributions in the literary domain are also quite profound. Say, for example, Kabir Bijak, various poems and verses, the Granthavali, Dadu Panth, very important. You can always get a question or a part of a question that Dadu Panth is associated with whom. So please remember, it's the Granthavali, the Dadu Panth, that is deeply associated with Sant Kabir Das Ji of the Bhakti movement. Also remember that some of his contributions are also finding place in Sikhism, which means the Adi Granth Sahib, Sikh scriptures, because eventually all these people are believing in Bhakti, equality and devotional, please remember. Now, his works were written in Awadhi dialect, the Braj Bhasha. It also deeply therefore had a hand into creating the contemporary Hindi language as people use it. Okay, so it also led to a hybridization of Hindi language. He used Sant Bhasha, that's a language of poets who come from the Nirguna path, who believed in the abstract image of God. Okay, and also this is known as Ulat Bansi, known for his upside down saying. So sometimes in a very, very oxymoronic, paradoxical way, these people would create certain phrases and certain sentences. So that came to be known as Ulat Bansi, which means a language that's being used completely opposite to what it means, you know, it's a very literary device of saying, singing and praying. So that's what he was known for. Again, he preached his ideas for the unity of God, equality among all humans. And the next person we talk about is Ahilyabai Holkar. Again, a very, very predominant name, specifically when we talk about women empowerment. And we are celebrating 300th birth anniversary recently. So she was known for her exceptional administrative capacity, a very profound leadership skill, spiritual inclination. All that was in news recently, and let's understand that she was born in the modern day Ahmednagar district of Maharashtra back in 1725. She had married Khande Rao Holkar. He was the son of Malhar Rao Holkar, who was a commander in Maratha Peshwa Baji Rao's military unit. So after her husband had died in the Battle of Khumber in 1754. Now the name of the battle is quite important. Please remember, associated with which region, which year. And let's understand that she was somebody that, despite being a woman of that age and time, where women were not usually into military campaigns and administrative leadership, she had tremendous administrative and military strategies which she had learned from her father-in-law. Okay, and after her husband and her son, both of them died, she requested the Peshwa that she should become the ruler, backed by the support of her army, and she was therefore known for her great ability to rule. Okay, so she therefore broke down all the gender stereotypes as they existed in the 18th century India. Now on that note, let's also remember that Indian society of the 18th 19th century was also sometimes referred to as the dark ages of Indian society, pretty much like you had the dark ages in Europe before Renaissance came. In Indian society also, post Mughal empire was, as Mughal empire was deteriorating post the 1700s, and right before the British rule was becoming predominant in India, a period of transition saw a very black period. It was a very dark period because it was pretty backward in terms of gender stereotypification, in terms of massive caste barriers, in terms of women lack of education, early marriage, all kind of social ill practices had crept in Indian culture. Also, the ill practices associated with various religions also crept in side by side. So this only ended as the social religious reform movement of India picked up after the emergence of people like Raja Ram Mohan Roy in the 1820s. So it was during this period that a woman was able to break gender stereotypes and become a ruler, an administrator. So that's the commendable achievement she's made. And she established the Maheshwar in Madhya Pradesh as the seat of the Holkar dynasty. She also created a textile industry, and today it's known for its Maheshwari sari. So again, you could relate this with the GI tag indexing of India, that when you talk about the GI tags of specific places, we should also know how they were actually initiated in a particular region of India. So this is where it comes from. And Ahilyabai was a prolific builder. She used to believe so much in architectural contributions that she constructed many temples and shelters for the destitute and the poor. Her most important contribution happens to be the repair and the rejuvenation of Kashi Vishwanath temple in 1780. Please remember. Also, she was responsible behind many kind of social cultural reforms, religious reforms. She was a very, very pro-modernist leader of her time, and she was popularly named by people as Rajmata Ahilya Devi Holkar. Okay, and let's remember that she was given the title of the philosopher queen by a very, very famous British historian, John Kay. Okay, so she was backed by the title of the philosopher queen because of all the contributions that she had actually made. And the next person that we talk about is Ram Prasad Bismil. We just spoke about his name just a few minutes before when we were talking about the HSRA and the HRA, the organizations that led military nationalism in India against the British government. We also spoke about the robbery of the train near Lucknow that was conducted by many people together, for which later Chandrashekhar Azad was also held. So in that regard, we celebrate the 127th birth anniversary of Ram Prasad Bismil. Okay, so he was somebody who was born in Uttar Pradesh, and he joined the Arya Samaj. Now, Arya Samaj, of course, was an organization founded back in 1875 by Swami Dayanand Saraswati. The aim was to purify Indian culture and to go back to Vedic religion, to remove all the ill practices associated with contemporary Hinduism, to completely negate the existence of caste barriers and gender divides, and to have a very pure and democratic religion. So he joined Arya Samaj, Ram Prasad Bismil ji, and he became a very, very talented writer. Of course, he used to write behind many pseudonyms or pen names like Bismil, which means somebody who is very restless about bringing social change, very proactive in social reform. And his ideas also took shape after reading Bhai Parmanand's death sentence. This inspired him really to take up military or extreme nationalism. Now, having said that, he expressed his anger in the form of a poem called Mera Janma. So quite important to remember there. And he therefore obviously believed in a very non-Gandhian principle of waging the national movement, that is a revolutionary movement where you are fighting British tooth and nail. Okay. Now, he was of course involved in many controversies because the British government saw them as anti-Raj. Of course, for India it is a very memorable milestones all these are, because they meant so much to India's heritage. I mean, he was somebody who's really made Indian national movement proud, and some of these controversies were the Mainpuri controversy. Now, Mainpuri today also is known for a very important product that comes from Mainpuri. It's a GI tagged index product. Could you please tell me which product is that? Now, if you are able to share the response, I'll definitely read your name aloud, and there's some special thing that I will announce on that. But then you must first let me know the answer. So the Mainpuri controversy was when, frustrated by the moderate ideology of pacification and peace with the British, he founded a revolutionary organization who Ram Prasad Bismil ji named as Matri Devi. Please remember for the exams, I am marking it important. Now, in 1918, he was involved in Mainpuri conspiracy, where he distributed literature that was banned because it was considered as a sedition against the British Raj, named as Mainpuri Ki Pratigya, which spoke about robbing the government funds and financing the revolutionary cause, but he still went ahead and he distributed that. So that was considered by the British as a sedition. Then of course he was associated with the HRA, Hindustan Republican Association, founded by Sachindranath Sanyal. Please don't get confused here, because many students constantly are confused between HRA, who founded, HSRA, who changed the name and when. So remember the Firoz Shah Kotla episode and how Bhagat Singh ji did that. So all that is very crucial here. So definitely HRA was established, and in 1920 Ram Prasad Bismil ji joined the HRA, and he also wanted to establish a federal republic of United States of India after an armed revolution with the British. So complete independence was the idea. Then Kakodi train action near Lucknow in 1925, in which Chandrashekhar Azad was also arrested later. So he also robbed the train only to fund his own activities. That was the intention per se. And now therefore he was arrested and he was punished under the Kakodi conspiracy case. Now, talking about his prolific literary contributions, he believed in equality among all religions, Hindu, Muslim religions, and he spoke about human dignity, human equality. He was also somebody who spoke about how various religions could join together and then work towards an independent India, or the cause of an independent India. So now with this, we come to an end of this session, where we have discussed few important personalities for the day. And remember, although we say that all these people have made a massive contribution in India's freedom movement, but what we also need to remember is that their literary contributions are tremendous. So make sure we are also tuning into that who wrote which book and which organization came at which particular point of time, through whose initiative. So all that is important. And of course we shall be taking up other segment of the lecture in the upcoming classes, where we shall continue talking about Vallabhacharya Jayanti and many other personalities who are important for your UPSC prelims. So on that note, thank you so much and all the best.